All right, and welcome everybody to today's presentation about Beest 11.13 and updates in this version. All right, so welcome everybody to today's presentation about Beest 11.13 and the updates in this version. My name is Dmitry and I work for Providence, or as the publishers of the Beest software. So what we'll talk about today is a few of the changes in this version. The first two are in Beest. The other two are in the other applications, including Beest with the import KML and Lighter Calculator, which is actually a new tool in this version. So in Beest we have had two new changes. One is when you're viewing your inputs graphically in Beest, you can now locate so-called other objects, which are lines. I'll show that in a minute. We also changed the way that we fill in the profile base elevation in the Met Options section in Beest. And then in our import KML tool, we changed the way that tool works. So now it no longer writes your outputs to a file. Now it just writes into a grid, and you just copy and paste coordinates from the grid into Beest. And finally, also the new Lighter Calculator tool that's new in this version of Beest 3. So the first update is in how to get the other objects in Beest. Typically, those are lines with several segments that are used to model whole roads. Sometimes you set up a line. Sometimes you'd set up a line of volume sources to model a whole road. And Beest, you can draw that road by creating a line. Now, in previous versions of Beest, if you right-click on a blank area in Beest, a pop-up menu appears, and one of the options there is called Find. You can use it to find either source or building or tank. And what's new in this version is that now you can also find one of these other objects. And I'll now go ahead and open Beest and demonstrate this feature for you. So what we have in the example of facility on the screen that we're modeling is that we have a few sources there, building a tank, and also one of these line objects. And you add these in Beest by clicking this Add Other button and drawing the objects on your screen. And now if I right-click anywhere that's in a blank area in Beest, I see a pop-up menu that includes the Find entry. And if I click, for example, to find a building, I can select my building and say Find to just have the building highlighted on the screen, or I can also say Find and zoom, and Beest will also zoom in on the location of the building. This works similarly for if I say Find None, it'll just stop highlighting. This works similarly for sources and tanks on the screen. But now what's new in this version is now I can say Find and select Other, and it will find one of these road objects or line objects for me and select it, or and highlight it. So now if I say Find my road 2, then it will gray out everything else and just highlight this one in red. Again, what's new in version 11.13 is that now in this Find menu, now have a new option to find the other objects that this option didn't exist in the previous versions of Beest. If I say find and zoom, for example, it will also zoom in on the road. I'm going to stop highlighting everything. I would say find and say none. So that's the first enhancement in Beast. The next one has to do with our Met Options screen, which you can find by clicking the Met Options button, or going to menu and saying Pathway and Met. Right. So in Met Options, we have a button there. We have a button there that fills in our base elevations for the Met station. That's using metadata files, and that's actually based on I believe it's based on a list of Met stations that the United States EPA has created several years ago. So if a station is on that list and you click the button in Beast, it will find your elevation and fill it in. If it cannot find the station, then what it does now is it will give you an error message and just fill it in as 0. Then you have to put in the elevation yourself. In previous versions of Beast, if the station was not on the list, clicking the button just had no effect. But now you get a warning message. So again, if we take a look at our example modeling file, so for a station where we know what the station is, if I click the button, it goes ahead and puts my elevation for me. But if I have another metadata file from a station that's not on the list, now you see that in this version, Beast now gives you a warning about it and puts in the 0 for the elevation. Now that list is a few results. I encourage you also to, if you do use it, to also confirm the elevation with either Google Earth or using another tool that would allow you to see that elevation. So that's the next feature in Beast. Now the next update in Beast actually has to do with our import KML tool that copies data from Google Earth and copies the coordinates for buildings and sources into Beast. The first change is that in previous versions of Beast Suite, you had to save data from Google Earth in a KML file. Now you can also save it in the KMZ file, which is actually the default file that Google Earth uses. And actually to access this tool from Beast, I'm going to go and bring up another example modeling scenario. To open this tool from Beast, you would go to the File menu, click Import, and select the item called Google Earth KML. So I'm just going to File, Import, then Google Earth KML. And this opens up our import program. So the change now is that in this version, this will actually write save to a new output tab in a grid, and then you can copy and paste coordinates from there to Beast directly. Now to illustrate that we have another example modeling scenario. We have a facility with a fence line, and in the southwest corner, which is where I was mentioning in a moment, we have a few buildings and tanks as well as sources. We have a few buildings here and sources. And if I export this to Google Earth, I will actually see that some of those buildings do not line up correctly. So what we're going to do is redraw them in Google Earth and then use the tool to put the new coordinates into Beast. An example, I will just redraw this building 19, which you see does not quite line up to where the actual building is located. So I'll do that, and then we'll import the correct coordinates into Beast using this tool. So I'm going to do this. I'm actually going to just delete the building as well as building 17. Now I'm just going to redraw them in Google Earth. To do that, I'll use the buttons here at the top of Google Earth. In this case, it's the Add Polygon. So I'm going to call this building 19 underscore new. I'm going to move this screen out of the way and start drawing my coordinates just using the mouse. Actually, no. Let's do that again. I'm going to hold down the Shift button, then point at each of my building corners, and that will draw the correct coordinates for me. And I'm also going to tell Google Earth to not fill in the square. It's just going to be outlined. Okay, so that's my building 19. Okay, so this is building 19. Now do the same for building 17, which is, actually, I'm going to draw one of these new buildings as well. So now that I have those buildings in Google Earth, what I can do is go over here to the left side of the screen and right and say Save Place As, and give it a file name. And now that file will be used with the import tool to put these new coordinates into Beast. So if I close that for a moment, where it says select input file to import, this is going to be that file, which is my CAMZ file. My coordinate system is selected by default, so I don't need to do anything there. Now when I say run, it will import my data. But what is now new in Beest 11.13 is now that I can show my points and buildings in a grid here. Now since I didn't change any of my my coordinates here, those haven't changed, but what I could do is, for example, take these coordinates, go to the source grid view in Beast, sources grid view, let's LSGT, I'm going to say edit, copy, now I can just go ahead and paste new values right into the grid in Beast. Now if I select polygons instead of points, what I will now see are my building coordinates, and if I expand this window a little bit and scroll down, we will see our new building 19 and new building coordinates. So let's go ahead and copy those into Beast. What I will do in Beast now is go to the buildings, and go to grid view. Now as you can see here, in Beest, the coordinates are listed all on one row in the view, but in this tool they're listed, as rows and columns. But what you can actually, well, first we'll have 4 coordinates here. So we have actually added an option here in this import KML tool called copy as a row on the edit menu. So if I say edit copy as one row, then paste these coordinates into Beest for this building 19, they will all be placed on one row in the grid here. And similarly, I could add my new building down here and copy and paste coordinates into this next row. And now you'll see the building 19's position has been adjusted in Beest after that. So again, what we've changed in Beest 11.13 is that we now have this grid within our import KML tool that allows you to just copy and paste coordinates directly into Beest. And finally, we have added a new tool to Beest called LiDAR Calculator. Now, LiDAR is actually serving method where you would point a laser at a building or tank or an object and use it to measure the distance to that object. Typically, what's done is that you use a drone or an airplane that flies above your plant, and it points the laser at the buildings and tanks within your facility, and gets a collection of points with the XY coordinates and the heights. There's XY coordinates and heights, at least heights above sea level. All of those are saved to large file that has many XY coordinates in it. It's called the point cloud data file. That needs to estimate building tank heights if they are not already known to you. This is typically used in Beest if you need to calculate downwards for those building heights. So for those buildings and tanks but don't know the heights, or they have not been provided to you by the plant operator. So that's what the data file is for LiDAR. What you would do with our tool is, I also need to mention that there are a few sources for downloading this data. For some of the coastal states in the United States, the data are available from the NOAA United States government website. So this covers a few areas along the coast of the United States, but not parts of the interior. You would need to find that the data for those locations elsewhere. Then once you have downloaded a file, you can put that file into a program. You get the estimated buildings and heights. Now in this example, you would actually access this tool just from the Start menu or desktop, not from Beest. I'm going to open an example file here for LiDAR Calculator. Now the idea is that in Beest you have all of your buildings and tanks entered. You just don't have and you have the elevations for them. You just don't have the heights. In this example, we have buildings and tanks at a facility in Louisiana. So what you would do in Beast is that you would enter all of your information that you do know, except for the heights, and then select an input file, which is going to be our larger data file. All right, now there are actually two more things for you to enter. One is this minimum elevation. What that will do is that any height in the file that's below that is going to be ignored. Since this is near sea level, I'm going to say that any point that was captured in the data file that's less than 0, we're going to go ahead and ignore that point. And the next thing is the search distance. What you have to enter there is how far away from a building or tank do you search to find its elevation. You don't want to go too far, because otherwise the height of the highest building or tank in that area is going to be assigned to a building that's potentially lower than that. And by default, this is 10 meters. So our tool is going to search for 10 meters around every building and tank in our example input, and see what height it's going to find out of this input file that came from that NOAA website. In my example, I'll just go ahead and copy and paste the example inputs insert tool into the data tab. And click the Run button. And then this tool will calculate the heights for me, which can then be copied and pasted back into Beast. And for more information about this tool and how to use it, we actually have a user manual which you can find on the help menu, in the help and user manual, that explains these inputs in detail. But in our case, I do have an example. A point file. I'm going to say ignore everything that's below 0 and search within 10 meters of every building and tank for the height. And now when I say run, it's going to take a minute or two because some of these data files can be quite large. They can be tens or even hundreds of megabytes. So we'll go ahead and just wait for this process to be completed. Okay, looks like that first looks good. Do that again with a few fewer points. Okay, 0, 10. I will go ahead and answer just a few buildings, and then that should go through a little faster. Typically, this process does typically take a few minutes to be completed. Say run. Okay, and then there it goes. Okay, there we go. So now the heights were calculated successfully. These are the estimated heights based on our LiDAR data. In this case, it's in meters above ground. Those are the units there, meters above ground. And now I can take these heights and copy and paste them back into Beast. Again, this tool is only used if you need to run downward calculations within Beast, but you don't have the building heights or tank heights supplied to you. And again, for more information, I encourage you to go to the user manual for this tool which explains a little better what it's doing and what the inputs are. All right, so those were the changes in Beast 11.13. We will now go ahead and stop the recording and take questions from everybody. Thank you for listening.